Good evening. Tonight we will be studying chapter 2 in Tractate Sukkah. Tonight's class is dedicated in loving memory of my dear mother, Rivka Bas Harab Reb Shloimeh. In last chapter, we discussed many laws that pertain to the building of the sukkah. In this chapter, we're going to study the laws of how one actually lives in the sukkah or dwells in the sukkah during Sukkot itself. Mishnah Aleph. Hayoshin tachas amito basukah. Layotzi yedei chivosei. If a person puts a bed in his sukkah and he goes to sleep under the bed.
Oh, that's what the rabbis do with the Mishnah.
So, layotzi yedei chivosei. So the rule is he does not fulfill his obligation. Now, the Gemara in Masechtas Sukkah quantifies this statement of the Mishnah. And the Gemara explains that the Mishnah here is talking about not just any bed, but rather it's talking about a bed that underneath the bed is 10 tfachim high, 10 handbreadths high.
It's like 2 sukkahs.
So now it's like 2 sukkahs. The bed itself is not a proper sachach. And so he's sleeping under the bed, it's not acceptable. But if it was lower than that, for example,
The bed is a proper oil.
if it was lower than that, the bed would be batel, would be nullified to the sukkah itself. And even if he was under the bed, it would be okay because the bed wouldn't intervene, would not be an intervening substance
Even
between him and the
it's
schach.
not even it's not a kosher schach.
Yeah, because again, we dismiss the bed altogether. But again, from the Mishnah itself, the Mishnah doesn't quantify the statement, only the Gemara does. A person who sleeps under a bed does not fulfill his obligation. Rabbi Yehuda says, Noyagin hayinu shahayinu yeshenim tachas amita mepnei askenim le'amru lanu davar. Rabbi Yehuda challenges this halacha, and he says that we, on a regular basis, we would sleep under the bed in the sukkah, and we did this in the presence of the elders, the scholars, and no one ever told us anything. No one ever rebuked us or told us not to. Rabbi Shimon has his own story. Rabbi Shimon retorts back to Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'aseh v'Tavi. There's a story with Tavi. Tavi is the famous servant of Rabbi Gamliel. Avdei Rabbi Gamliel, he was the slave or servant of Rabbi Gamliel. Now a slave, a proper slave that's owned by a Jew, within 12 months he goes through a conversion process. That's the way it's supposed to be. Otherwise, if he does not go through this conversion process, you have to get rid of him. Now, when he goes through this conversion process, he becomes somewhat of a Jew. He's not a full Jew, but somewhat of a Jew. And in regards to mitzvahs, his obligations are like those of a woman. A woman is only required to fulfill mitzvahs that are a mitzvah leisaseh, a negative commandment, or a mitzvah sheinas man grama, or a mitzvah that has no connection to time. So, for example, honoring your parents has no connection to time. You have to do it all the time.
So Rabbi Kanani has to go through a conversion process.
That's correct.
If he doesn't, then he has to release him.
Yeah, you have to get rid of him.
Wow.
So, Tavi was not only he was a servant of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he was also a smart fellow, and he was a scholar of sorts. It's no surprise being under the tutelage of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Ma'aseh v'Tavi Avdei Rabbi Gamliel. There was a story with the Tavi, the servant of Rabbi Gamliel. Shahaya Yoshin Tachas Amita. He was sleeping under the bed. V'amar lahen Rabbi Gamliel askenim. And the elders who came to visit Rabbi Gamliel commented to them, Isim Tavi Avdi, have you seen Tavi, my servant? Shehu Salmit Chacham, he's a scholar. V'yedeya, and he knows, she'avodim p'turim min ha-sukkah, servants are exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah. Sukkah is a time-bound mitzvah. It is only applicable on sukkah, so it's time bound by time. And so Tavi was a scholar and he knows that he doesn't have to sleep in the sukkah. Lefichach, therefore, Yoshenu tachas amita. Therefore, he's sleeping under the bed. Well, if from these comments, we could learn that according to Rabbi Gamliel, Shahayoshin tachas amita, whoever sleeps underneath the bed, lo yotzi de chivasai, he does not fulfill his obligation. By the fact that Rabbi Gamliel was showing off his servant, saying, see how smart he is? He knows all the laws. He knows the details. Because he's a servant, he's not obligated, and therefore he can sleep under the sukkah, under the bed. Because if he wasn't a servant, he would not be allowed to sleep under the bed. Beis, Mishnah Beis. Hasemich sukkosei b'charei hamita. If one supports his sukkah on the legs of a bed, kshera, it is kosher. What are we talking about? We're talking about a bed frame that has posts on the side. The mattress itself is low, and now over the top parts of these posts, these leg posts, he extends a sukkah over on top of his bed.
Wow.
Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda, all along Rabbi Yehuda has been going according to his shita. From the beginning of last week's chapter 1, Rabbi Yehuda holds that a sukkah is to be a permanent type structure. It has to be a strong structure. And that's why he believes that a sukkah, even over 20 amas, is acceptable. Why? Because he doesn't bother him that a sukkah is of a permanent nature. It needs to be strong. Although it's a diras arai, but it still needs to be strong. Now, what he is saying, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion here is, if you're going to move the bed and then the sukkah is going to move with it, this is not a structure. This is a flimsy thing that you did, a temporary, haphazard structure that you put. You have a bed and you added some schach. So what he's saying here is, if you were able to move the bed and the whole sukkah moves with it, that's not a kosher sukkah according to Rabbi Yehuda.
But a sukkah is a temporary structure.
I'm sorry?
Right, but the sukkah itself is a temporary structure.
Yes, it's a temporary structure, but it needs to be built in a solid fashion according to Rabbi Yehuda. Sukkah hamiduv leles. What happens when you have schach that are just thrown down onto your joists, and it's in no particular order? You have you take your schach and you dump it on top of your sukkah, and now you have, let's use for example bamboos going all different ways. It's just a glob of sticks going any which way. No pattern of any sort. The shitzilasa meruba mechamasa. So long as the shade is more than the sun is being allowed through. In other words, there is more area covered than there is exposed. Kshera, such a sukkah is kosher. Hama'uba kamin bayis. A person who places a lot of schach on top of their sukkah. So, and it's so thick that when you're in the sukkah, it feels like you're in a home.
Oh.
Just like a home you can't see through. You don't see the stars. Says the Mishnah, even though you cannot see the stars through this schach, it is kosher. And indeed, this is the Chabad custom, to have a lot of schach, to be marba in schach. And the Rebbe once commented, what about you're supposed to be able to see the stars.
Right.
So the Rebbe says, an answer, you could poke through one area and you could look through the stars in one area. But it is the Chabad custom to have a lot of schach, thick amounts of schach. Now this is talking about Chabad. This is certainly a law, a Mishnah, that speaks to our senses. Come to the table. Yep. A person who puts a sukkah on top of a wagon. Does that sound familiar? A sukkah mobile. These are the early days sukkah mobiles. Or if a person puts a sukkah on the deck of a ship, kshera, it is kosher.
Portable sukkah.
Portable sukkah, mobile sukkah. Here at Anchi Lubavitch, every year we have our mobile sukkah going around. So we have a support here from the Mishnah that I guess this is not a recent invention. Now, in both of these cases, in the case of a sukkah that's on top of a wagon and a sukkah that is on top of a ship, both of these are kosher v'oilin lo b'yomtiv. And on the Chag itself, meaning to say the first 2 days of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, we'll get to that soon, or on Shabbos, oilin lo, you could go up onto such a sukkah. Now this is obvious. What's not so obvious is the next halacha, Bereisha Ilan. What happens if you put a sukkah on top of a tree?
Oh boy.
Oyal gabi gomel, or on top of a camel. Kshera, these sukkahs are also considered kosher. However, the ein oilan l'b'yomtiv, you cannot go up on Yom Tiv. Now, the reason you can't climb onto a camel on Yom Tiv, and the reason why you can't climb a tree on Yom Tiv, is a gzera of the Rabbanon. Chazal disallowed it. Minat Torah, you would be allowed to, but the rabbis did not allow it. And so therefore, although during Chol HaMoed this would be considered a kosher sukkah, on Shabbos and Yom Tiv, you would not be allowed to use this sukkah.
So if the kids have a tree house, they build the tree house up there.
They can't climb up the tree. Yep. Shtayim be'ilin v'achas b'dei adam. If 2 walls are in the tree, and the third wall of the sukkah, we've already mentioned previously that a sukkah requires at least 3 walls. So if 2 walls are on trees and 1 is a man-made addition, so that you have the third wall, in either of these cases, if you have 2 trees, 2 walls are made out of trees, and 1 is placed there by man, or vice versa, both of these cases are kosher, and you cannot climb on it on Yom Tov. You cannot use this sukkah on Yom Tov. Now, what happens if you have 3 walls that are put up by man, and for the last wall, for the 4th wall, that is a tree?
Because two and a half walls is already kosher.
Now, since 2.5 walls is already kosher, so the 3 that you put up is certainly kosher. So now the tree is only an addition, doesn't affect the legality of the sukkah, because the sukkah was a kosher sukkah regardless,
With 3 walls.
with already 3 walls. So this 4th wall is unnecessary. Therefore, not only is it kosher, you can go and use such a sukkah on Yom Tov.
So if you didn't have a 4th wall and it was
3.
open, it was open.
Yes, it would be kosher.
Wow.
It's an entrance.
Zaklo, says the Mishnah. This is the general rule. Kol shenita la'ilan v'yechila lamed b'fnei atzmai. Any sukkah that if you took away the trees, it would still be standing and it would still be a kosher sukkah, which is the case here because there's already 3 walls. Kshera, it is kosher, and you can go onto this sukkah and use this sukkah on Yom Tov. Daled. If a person makes his sukkah between the trees, and the trees, all of the trees, all the walls are used, meaning all 3 walls, at least, are all from the trees, it's kosher. Now, what the Mishnah is telling us here, we're not talking about climbing the tree, but if you had a row of trees, and I'll remind you that so long as there could be gaps in between walls, so if you have wide trees lined up not far from each other, you can have a situation where you can have a tree. If you trim the branches overhanging the center.
That's the problem.
What?
That's the problem.
No, but if you trim the branches, so you could use live trees as your walls of your sukkah. So it says the Mishnah again, Ksheira, it's a kosher sukkah. Now, we're going to change the subject here for a moment. Now we're going to be talking about exemptions from using the sukkah. Shluchei mitzvah. A person who's a shliach to do a mitzvah. Who is such a person? I'll give you a simple example. A person who is going to what? To visit the sick. He's sent by a community to go visit the sick or to give food to poor people or whatever it might be. So paturim in a sukkah. So such a person, while he's being oisik in another mitzvah as a shliach, so he is pater from the sukkah. A person who's busy with a different mitzvah. He's busy. He's doing chesed. He's doing whatever it is, a different mitzvah. So he's pater from the sukkah. Oisik b'mitzvah pater. Yeah. Choylin, people who are sick, who are ill, and the people who are their nurses, the people who are taking care of them. P'turim in sukkah. Such people are pater from the sukkah. So not only is the sick person himself pater, but the person who's helping him out. Now the Mishnah tells us a statement. According to the law of the Torah, a person can eat and drink casually outside of the sukkah. What does casually mean? Doesn't mean if you're wearing denim, you can have a meal outside the sukkah. Casually means it's a casual meal. You're a casual snack. A snack. So if you want to have a bag of chips or you want to drink something and you're out of the sukkah, that's acceptable. I should mention, we've been talking about Chabad customs here tonight. Chabad custom is that we don't eat or drink outside of the sukkah whatsoever. Even if it's raining, we'll talk about that soon. And even on Shmini Atzeres, which is another point which we're going to talk about soon. So, and we'll explain that. So, but the law of the Torah, and not only the law of the Torah, the law as we practice it according to Shulchan Aruch, is that casual eating may be done outside the sukkah. Maisa, now the Mishnah tells us a story. One time, they brought Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai some cooked food to taste. Rabbi Gamliel, and to Rabbi Gamliel, they brought shtei chesaves u'delish shel mayim. They brought 2 dates and a pail of water. V'amru, and they said, halum la sukkah. Bring it up to the sukkah. So here we see that even though it's a casual eating, it's 2 dates and water, so it's not a meal by any stretch of the imagination. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, they were just giving him to taste a cooked dish. That's not a meal. Nevertheless, he said, bring it all up to the sukkah. So you see that 2 of the sages did not want to eat out of the sukkah, even to taste something, even to drink something, even if it's a couple of dates. But when they gave Rabbi Tzadok food, food that was less than the size of an egg, he took it with a cloth, and he ate it outside of the sukkah, and he did not bench afterwards. He's of the opinion that if it's less than a kabetza, if it's less than the size of an egg, if you eat something that's less than the size of an egg, you don't bench afterwards. Others are of the opinion that it has to, if it's beyond a kazayas, which is much smaller, the size of an olive, you have to bench. But in any case, the point here is that Rabbi Tzadok, a great scholar, a great Tana, he ate outside the sukkah. So now, what does this mean to us? If you see a Chabadnik and doesn't want to eat or drink out of the sukkah, what do you tell him? You don't say, hey, what are you adding on to the laws of the Torah? We have a precedence here in the Mishnah. Great scholars refused. And conversely, if you see somebody eating outside of the sukkah, he's eating a little snack, he's drinking something, what do you say to him? You don't say anything to him. Why? Because you have a fellow like Rabbi Tzadok, no less, who ate outside the sukkah. Again, of course, he wouldn't eat a full meal, a quick snack.
So it doesn't have to be less than. Doesn't have to be less than a kazayis.
No, it doesn't have to be less than a kazayis. We're just telling you this point that he didn't bench afterwards. Why? Because he holds that even if you eat a kazayis, you still don't bench. Only if you eat the size of a kabetza, the size of an egg, which is obviously much bigger. Rabbi Eliezer says, Arba esrei sudeis chayav adam lechel masukah. Rabbi Eliezer begins by telling us that over the course of Sukkot, how long is Sukkot? Sukkot is 7 days long, at least in Eretz Yisrael. And so, you eat 2 meals a day, minimum. So you have to eat at least 14 meals in the Sukkah. Achas b'yom, achas b'layla. 1 in the day and 1 at night. The Chachamim responded that there is actually no limit. There's no fixed obligation, and there's no fixed obligation. There's no limit, one way or the other. Meaning to say, according to the Chachamim are of the opinion is you live in the sukkah the way you live in your house. In your house, do you dafka specifically have 2 meals a day and not 3 or not 1? Whatever you feel like eating, that's what you eat. And so therefore, just like in the home, we don't have a specific amount that you're supposed to eat. Same thing as in the sukkah. Chutz milel yom tov rishon shel chag belvad. The only time that Chachamim say that you have to have a meal in the sukkah is the first night of Sukkot. If you want to snack the rest of Sukkot, then you don't have to eat in the sukkah at all, the rest of Sukkot. Now, why indeed do you have to eat a snack? Why do you indeed have to eat a full meal? Why do you have to have a meal inside the sukkah on the first night of Sukkot? It says in the pasuk, on the 15th day of this month, you have the festival of Sukkot. Elsewhere, it says, on the 15th day of this month is the festival of matzahs. Now, when the Torah uses similar words, that's called a Gzeira Shava. It's a common denominator. In other words, there's a common laws. Now, we all know that on the first night of Pesach, there's a mitzvah to eat matzah on Pesach. The rest of Pesach, you don't have to eat matzah if you don't want to. At least in Eretz Yisrael, there's no second Seder there, so you don't have to. A person, for whatever reason, doesn't want to wash. For the rest of Sukkot, the rest of Pesach, he doesn't have to. The mitzvah of eating matzah is specifically the first night of Pesach, and you have to. Same thing is, from this, the sages learn that you have to eat in the sukkah on the first night of Pesach. You have to have a meal. And it has to be in the sukkah. Yeah, even chutz la'aretz, sure. But Oidom Rabbi Eliezer, the first night of Pesach you have to eat matzah. The first night of Sukkot you have to eat in the sukkah. Chutz la'aretz or in Eretz Yisrael, doesn't matter. Oidom Rabbi Eliezer. So now Rabbi Eliezer changes his mind once he hears this from the Chachamim, that there's no fixed amount of meals that you need to eat. He changes his mind, and he makes another statement, in which the rabbis are going to disagree with him again.
That's not allowed.
Mi shaloi ochal leili yom tov harishon. A person who did not, for whatever reason, eat in the sukkah the first night of Sukkot, yashlim b'leili yom tov achrin. On the last night of Sukkot, he can add to his meal and make up for the fact that he missed eating in the sukkah. Now, the rabbis do not disagree with him. Now, the last night of Sukkot is when? It's Shmini Atzeres. So he doesn't mean that you're going to eat in the sukkah. He means you're going to eat in your house and you're going to add foods to what you were normally eating to make up for the fact that you didn't eat in the sukkah. He considers this like tashlumin. Tashlumin are the sacrifices and the offerings. If you miss them on sukkahs, you have tashlumin. You can make it up, even on Shmini Atzeres. The Chachamim dispute this idea, and they say, "Ein ladavar tashlum." There is no makeup for this. Al zeh nemar, on this type of idea, we make a statement: "Mu'uvas lo yuchal iskain." It is a twisted thing that cannot be straightened out. If you missed it, you missed it. And what is not there, you can't count. Meaning to say you missed it on the first night, and now this mitzvah has been gone. You can perform it again next year. You have an opportunity, hopefully. But what you missed out, and that's it.
There's no sukkah sheni like that.
There's no sukkah sheni. Yep. Zion. A person who has his head and the majority of his body in a sukkah. But his table, where his food is in the house. Beishamai says this arrangement is possible, it's not valid, you don't fulfill your obligation. Beisilul machshirin, and Beisilul says it is acceptable. Now, the Gemara, this Mishnah is actually incomplete. The Gemara completes the Mishnah and it explains that the argument here is on 2 points. Number one, the point is the minimum size of a sukkah. The argument here is, first off, if your sukkah does not fit your table, it can only fit your head and the majority of your body in there, but it can't fit your table, Beis Shammai says this sukkah is too small to be a kosher sukkah altogether. And Beis Hillel says it's acceptable.
How can your head be in the sukkah and you eat with the table outside?
You lean over the table, or your table's on to the right of you or to the left of you.
Lean over the table, so your head is outside the sukkah.
Let's say the table's on your side. You have no room it's a tiny sukkah. You have your table with your plate there. So you stick your fork in and you stick your head into the sukkah. Your table's to the right of you or to the left of you. And it's a small sukkah, it's a teeny sukkah. Says Beis Shammai, this is not a sukkah. You can't fulfill your obligation. If your table can't fit in a sukkah, it's not a kosher sukkah. Furthermore, even if your table is big, if your sukkah is big enough for your table, but for whatever reason, you're just sticking your head in the majority of your body in, he also says, Beis Shammai also says, Academy of Shammai says it's not acceptable. The Academy of Hillel says it is acceptable. Amrulen Beis Hillel leBeis Shammai. Beis Hillel says to Beis Shammai the following: Loikach hayamaisa. Did it not happen? Sha'olchu ziknei Beis Shammai v'ziknei Beis Hillel. The elders of both of our academies, the Academy of Shammai and the Academy of Hillel, went. Levakeres Rabbi Yochanan ben Hachironi. They went to visit Rabbi Yochanan the Charonite. And we found him. Our elders of our academies found him. They found him with this exact arrangement, where his head and the majority of him was in the sukkah. But this table was in his house.
The elders.
And they didn't say anything to him. Meaning to say, Beis Shammai is asserting, Beis Hillel is asserting that even your elders agreed to this because they didn't mention anything to Rabbi Yochanan when they saw him with this arrangement. Beis Shammai says to him, retorted back to Beis Hillel, you're messing up the whole story. You got the whole story wrong. From this story, you're trying to prove your point. The story was completely different. The story goes like this. They told him, if you always had this arrangement where your table was out and you only had the head and the majority of your body in the sukkah, you've never fulfilled the mitzvah of sukkah. So this notion that they didn't say anything is not true, according to Beis Shammai. They did tell him, and they told him off. They said this is not an acceptable sukkah. Ches. Further, we're going to be discussing who else is exempt from eating and sleeping in the sukkah. Noshim v'avodim, women, v'avodim, servants, ktanim, little children, pturim min sukkah. All of the above mentioned are potter min sukkah. They're all exempt. Here we're talking about any sukkah. They don't have to be in any sukkah. Kotan sheini tzarich le'imoy. What about a male kotan, a male minor? She'eni tzarich le'imoy, who does not require his mother. He doesn't need to be right near his mother. Chayav b'sukkah, says the Mishnah. He is obligated to dwell in a sukkah. Not that he's obligated min Torah to dwell in a sukkah because minors are exempt from mitzvahs. However, fathers are and other adults are mechuyev to train them in mitzvahs, boys and girls. Now, since when he's going to grow up, because he's a male, he will need to stay in a sukkah, on sukkah, so we're obligated to train him once he is old enough that he doesn't need to be on his mother's side and he can go of his mother's side. This is interpreted as, by the Rambam at least, as 5 or 6 years old. He can go in the sukkah with everybody else. He doesn't need to be right by his mother's side. And so we are obligated to train him. Maisa, v'yolda kalose shel Shammai hazaken. There was a story that the daughter-in-law of Shammai the elder gave birth. Ufichas amaziva, he opened up the plaster on the roof, and he covered the roof with schach over her bed. Why? Not for the infant, but because the infant had an older sibling who didn't want to leave his mother's side. Especially children are especially vulnerable right after their mom gives birth, and so he was staying near his mom. He didn't want to go in the sukkah, and so Shammai, in order to train his grandson in the mitzvah of sukkah, he created a sukkah over the mom's bed so that the older boy could be next to his mom and have a sukkah above him. Kol Shivas Hayamim. All 7 days, Adam Eisa Sukkasei Keva Uveisei Arei. All 7 days of Sukkot, you make your sukkah permanent, meaning to say that's your main place, that's your main dwelling place. And your house, that's the temporary place. That's where you go in temporarily. Now, what happens? Yorduk Shamim, if it starts raining, so at what point can you go into your house? Is it one drop sends you into your house? So the Mishnah quantifies. When can you leave the sukkah? As soon as the porridge, as soon as it starts dripping into your soup, and it's ruining your soup or your porridge, so now you're mitztayer, which you're not happy to be there because your soup is getting ruined, and so you go into the house. Because if you were in your house and you had a leak for whatever reason in the dining room, where would you go? You'd go eat in the kitchen. You're not going to sit there while water is coming down on your head. I should mention again tonight. We've been talking about all the Chabad minhagim. The Chabad minhag is to eat in the sukkah, even if it's raining, even if it's pouring. We still eat in the sukkah. And if you ever come to my house when it's raining on Sukkot, I have a whole. He says he wouldn't come. We have people eating inside also, if you don't want to eat outside. But I have a whole system in which the soup doesn't get ruined and the food doesn't get ruined. I put it in a bag, and I have a system in which my food doesn't get ruined.
Plastic covering over the schach, so you can still see.
No, past the covering over the schach we already spoke about in last Perek. That's not acceptable. That makes it a puzzle sukkah.
Oh well,
That's a puzzle sukkah because you're not under the schach. You're under the plastic
You can put it on
tarp.
after you leave the sukkah.
Now,
You shouldn't ruin the sukkah. Then when you come in again, you take it off.
take it off.
the mashal, they illustrated this with a parable. What did they illustrate with a parable? The idea that you go into the sukkah, and when you go into the sukkah, you're trying to perform a mitzvah, and Hashem causes it to rain. So, mashal, they illustrated this with a parable. Lama davar dema, to what can this be compared? A servant comes to serve to pour a cup of wine for his master, and and the master takes the jug and spritzes in his face. So obviously, what does that mean? He does, I don't want your service. You're here, you're coming to serve me with a cup of wine, right in your face. I don't want your service. So the Mishnah is telling us that when it rains, certainly on the first night of Sukkot, to what can be compared, we're coming to do a mitzvah to Hashem, and Hashem telling us, I don't want your mitzvahs. Hashem is holding on to the Gevura here of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Sukkot is all about sweetening the harsh days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the days of judgment, the days of awe, with simcha, and here you come, and Hashem says, not interested, I'm going to make it rain. So what do? Again, we stay in the sukkah, even if it's raining. We tell Hashem, we're here, we're going to serve you. I'm ksheyerev in a good way. Have a very good evening. Please join us again next week for chapter 3 of Sukkah.
Cool.